Hey, thanks for joining, everybody. We're gathered here today to talk about this topic, breaking through the invisible barriers of scaling Agile. I have thoughts, and I have sourced the collective opinion of coaches that I respect and admire. We've got a Slido that we're going to use. Sorry, a Slido that we're going to use to gather questions. We're going to talk at the end about. We're going to answer some questions. So, a couple of ways you can get in there. You can either go to Slido and enter that code 7097835, or just get your phone out and take a picture of that QR code, or point your camera at the QR code and let it do its thing. We've got at the bottom of the screen, in case you're not ready to do this quite yet, we've got a reminder. You can just go to Slido and pop in the code. So I'm John Cruson. I founded Sketch going on 8 years ago. We're on a mission to change the ways people work together to meet the demands of the 21st century. And this conversation this morning is part and parcel of that. Why am I talking about this? Just a few highlights of my past that have given me an opportunity to formulate an opinion on this topic. I've been involved in transformations in agility, improvements in agility across the globe for a decade or so. Mostly in the healthcare, financial services, enterprise software space, a few packaged goods organizations here and there. But also I've had the opportunity to see transformations occur and to see Agile adoptions occur from multiple different perspectives, from the perspective of technology management, from the perspective of product management, and from the project management lens as well. So we're gonna keep that in mind as we go through the day. Just a thought or two about how this webinar might be valuable for you. I don't expect this to, blow the skull off of any individual, but maybe there's a thing or two that you could pick up out of this thing, something that's worth trying that you haven't tried before, just a tip or a trick. I wouldn't suggest trying all of the things that we're talking about, but maybe a small subset or a handful of things. But also, if we could just maybe take a minute to look at the problem a little bit differently. Sometimes clarifying the problem makes it easier to see what a solution might look like if you happen to get stuck inside of one of these invisible barriers. So we're talking about breaking through the invisible barriers of scaling Agile. It's the webinariest title we could possibly come up with. And as a means for structuring this conversation, we thought we would just kind of take it backwards here and talk about scaling Agile first and what that means, talk about what some of these invisible barriers look like, and then some strategies for breaking through them. So if you'll indulge me in a little PowerPoint animation, I can't get through a PowerPoint without doing that. So we're going to start with at the back end, the scaling Agile piece. What are we talking about? Well, let's start with Agile. By the way, let me just caveat or editorialize here for a minute. I've been told there might be a few hot takes in here. There might be a few opinions that could be considered controversial. So stick around for some of those. The opinions of John Cruson do not necessarily universally reflect the opinions of Sketch Development, but this is where we are in 2023. Agile has been applied. Agile has been misapplied, misimplemented, misused, misdefined for over 20 years now. And despite some really good attempts and some really good implementations and examples of agility in the wild, there are plenty of us involved in agility in some fashion. I think all of us at some point or another, we have contributed to the misunderstanding, the mass confusion about what Agile is and what it isn't. I think it's time to redefine. I'm going to take a stab here at explaining what we think agility is. It's not just what we think. We're trying to condense 20 years worth of thoughts and ideas, practices into one run-on sentence. And it looks a little bit like this. Agility is about cross-functional teams of self-organized individuals. So it's about teams, and it's about individuals in those teams that have cross-functional capabilities to deliver something without external management imposing how it operates. Those cross-functional teams of self-organized individuals delivering value continuously, not in large batches, not in a one-and-done style, but continuously, and not delivering the completion of tasks, but delivering value. And frequently. So continuously and frequently, so that we can learn from that delivery, we can adjust accordingly, indefinitely. So that's where we're coming from. This is what agility is all about in Sketch's view and in my view. And this is what we're trying to scale and spread across organizations. But we're not just talking about agility, we're talking about agility at scale. And if, I often, I go back to complexity science when we talk about scale. Hydrogen and oxygen at scale is water. But one single hydrogen-oxygen molecule is not wet. One team can represent agility in a very different way that multiple teams in an organization can represent agility. We have to remember that Agile at scale looks a little bit different than Agile within a team. We also have to remember that Agile at scale is a management choice. There's some confusion out there, and there are maybe some controversy, maybe a diversity of opinion. Some people believe that Agile is the absence of management, or Agile is an alternative to management. Agile is management. Agile is a choice to manage in a certain way, where most of the decisions about management are placed in the hands of the teams that are delivering. It's not the absence of management. One of the things that we have to remember, if we think about changing the management choice, is that management choices are largely driven at the top of the organization. So to have this discussion about taking this thing that happened at the bottom of an organization and drive it upward throughout the organization can't be done without alignment from the overall understanding of what an organization believes is the management choices. I'm going to use some bad words here. Resources have to be allocated. Investment decisions have to be made. These are management choices that are made by leaders in an organization. Another thing to remember about Agile at scale is that it can look different based on the lens that you're looking at. I kind of alluded to it in my introduction. But an Agile at scale implementation looks very different to the PMO than it does to the Chief Product Officer. And it looks very different to the Chief Product Officer than it does to the individual responsible for developing and delivering value on a day-to-day basis. These are the things that have to be kept in mind as we think about what it is that we're even scaling. So speaking of which, what are we trying to scale? I mean, are you trying to scale your process? Did you find that you have an Agile team that's delivering value consistently, frequently, continuously, learning from that delivery and adjusting accordingly, and that's the thing that you want to scale, but you're discovering the processes inside there? Have you discovered that there's a mindset inside that team that's a little bit different than the rest of the organization, and you want to scale that out to the organization? Is there a cultural element of what this team has embodied that you would like to spread throughout the organization? Have you recognized that there's an opportunity to make decisions within the team that you would like to replicate throughout the rest of the organization? Maybe you want to take this Agile team and you want to spread it in a like-minded fashion so that you can gather alignment. You can use it as a means to align the organization. Maybe you had a really good experience with your Agile team and you want the rest of the organization to soak up that juicy goodness. Maybe you've discovered that there's a level of adaptability that comes with this team, and you want the rest to see it. Hopefully, you're not thinking that the inherent waste that comes from a continuous delivery system is something that you'd want to scale. But maybe the predictability that you've discovered from within the team is something that you want to scale. Maybe you've discovered that you deliver a higher level of quality inside that organization, and you want to scale that. Maybe you've discovered that Jira is the way to go, and really, it's just about making sure everybody else uses Jira the same way that you do. Hopefully not. Maybe it's the speed. Maybe it's a level of control that you perceive that you've been able to gather from this team, and you want to spread your locus of control. Well, some of those are valid reasons for scaling. Some are invalid. But we also need to talk about that term scale, right? At its basis, scaling suggests that something exists that you want to, that is scalable, that you would like to see occur at a higher level. Well, when we're talking about scaling, we're not necessarily talking about changing or transforming. We're just talking about this thing that exists over here existing at a higher level of existence. Are we just replicating? Are we trying to create exact copies or imitating with exact copies? Or are we trying to take the good characteristics of the team and emulate those characteristics in whatever way that they may occur given the specific context of those teams? Hopefully, when we think about scaling, we're thinking more about emulating versus imitating, duplicating and expanding. Also, more manufacturing-oriented terms, something that we're trying to stay away from. At the end of the day, what we mean by scale, when we think about scaling Agile, we're talking about making Agile work when there's a lot of people here, whatever that means. We're talking about creating an organization that is Agile because the pieces and parts of that organization are also Agile. Or at a minimum, really just expanding the radius of success, figuring out what worked for this team over here and making it work for other teams that aren't necessarily utilizing the practices and the mindsets that those practices protect. So let's talk about some of those invisible barriers now that we've sort of level set on what we think scaling means. The barriers are everywhere, and we're not here to talk about the visible barriers. There are certainly some barriers that are evident. Your proximity to the members of the team, that is a visible barrier. Here we are post-pandemic, mostly operating in a world where the proximity is pretty low. Not a lot of us have the opportunity to sit across the table from the rest of our team members. For me to sit across the table from a product owner, from the Scrum Master, and from the rest of my developer partners. Microsoft Project, if you see that in your organization and you're trying to scale agility using Microsoft Project, it's pretty easy to see. It's not going to work. The presence of really large scope documents. It's not hard to run into a large scope document and say, okay, well, this is going to get in the way of us scaling more quickly. And the presence of silos and tickets and handoffs. All of those things are readily visible. We're not talking about those things. We've kind of talked those things to death. I want to talk about some things that are more invisible. I don't want to say insidious, but they might be hiding in plain sight. For example, your Agile center of control. So again, hot takes. It's not my intention to offend anybody who might be operating in an Agile center of control or an Agile center of excellence or a LACE or a community of practice. What I really want to point out is the idea that an Agile center of excellence or an Agile center of control, when used as a control mechanism, tends to invisibly hinder the opportunity to scale. The reason that an Agile Center of Excellence is created too often is that it is built to control the implementation of Agile concepts on a team-by-team basis. When we see the Agile Center of Excellence work, we see it work when the mission, the vision, the objective of that Center of Excellence is intended to be an enabler of agility, is intended to provide a service to allow agility to thrive in a team in the ways that make sense for that team, as opposed to handing down a checklist of these are the metrics that you will record and report up. This is the length of your cadence upon which you will report those metrics, and so on. When you do something like that, when you set a centralized authority to dictate this is what Agile is going to look like in our organization, something strange happens to team autonomy. It sort of withers because they don't get to make the choices about how the teams operate. They don't get to make the choices about what metrics they report that make sense for that team. And also, another thing that happens is that the value of scaling, the value of even having Agile as a thing in your organization tends to get concentrated into that Agile Center of Excellence. And then you wind up with a situation where others outside the team kind of wonder, well, what is in it for me? What's the value of having Agile as a part of this organization? So what do we do about it? What's the breakthrough there? Intentional scaling really is the breakthrough here. We need to focus on outcomes and sort of relax our grip on on frameworks. So we focus at Sketch. We focus on 7 outcomes, and we would prefer to scale team happiness. We would prefer to scale quality, speed to market, customer satisfaction, adaptability, predictability, and alignment. What changes specifically when we're doing that? Day to day, not much, but it certainly changes the conversations that anybody in an Agile Center of Excellence would have with their customers. Instead of talking about you're not doing Scrum right, we're talking about let's look at the opportunities for adapting based on certain changes to the market or learnings from the product management group. We can scale predictability without having to dictate cadences, for example. Let's talk about another one. My Agile is better than your Agile. It's sort of an invisible, here I am trying to emulate agility in teams that haven't necessarily adopted it yet. But I mean, let's be real. You got to find a pretty dark corner of your organization to find somebody who will say, I've never heard of this thing called Agile. It's a quarter of a century old. And in fact, what you're more likely to run into is somebody who's already developed an opinion about what Agile looks like and what Agile should look like. So you're not just battling against current state and current thresholds of delivery. You're battling against those other opinions that think it should look a completely different way, which gets in the way of alignment and gets in the way of productive scaling. We prefer not to focus on the idea of scaling. Scaling is more of a manufacturing mindset. We focus on expanding the radius of success. Again, it goes back to the idea that it's not a controller, it's an enabler. We'd prefer to just share what we've learned. We'd rather figure out ways to emulate what has worked in the teams that are working and then expand it through more communicative measures rather than dictatorial measures. Existing momentum is a barrier. The momentum of your organization and the tools and the processes and the tricks that have been used in order to move the organization forward are invisibly getting in the way of changing things around to operate in a more agile fashion. Number one, hiring for quantity. If there is a pervasive opinion that we can just throw more people at it, and that'll get us to operate faster, this runs counter to the mindset that exists in a functional world of agility. If we haven't trained our people, if they are underskilled in the ways of agility, they're going to go back to muscle memory. They're going to use the skills that they do have. If those skills haven't been developed, you're going to battle against the ability to get people to operate a different way. Learned helplessness as well in an organization. If the momentum has been created that says, all of the decisions and all of the best ideas in an organization come from the top of the organization, the rest of the organization really just need to fall in line and follow suit. We're talking about a very different world here. We're talking about a world where the majority of the help and the majority of the decision making happens at the lower levels of the organization, the levels that are closest to market changes, closest to the feedback from the customer. When we're dealing with a situation like this, where we're trying to change the momentum of an organization in a different way, we have to stop looking at and communicating the value of Agile at scale on a quarter-by-quarter basis, which is easier said than done. It's really hard to sell value on a 3 to 5 year basis, and it's very easy to think, well, it's really just a matter of putting these teams together and having them deliver. But there are so many sociological momentum-driven barriers that we can't get caught in that idea that a quarter from now, 2 quarters from now, we're going to be in a different space. Years from now, we're going to see the real value on a long-term basis of what a change is going to look like. Of course, outdated technology in ways that aren't readily visible are going to get in the way. If the majority of what you're trying to work on is a mainframe solution, not that was a bad decision, but it's a thing that exists in your organization, and it is harder to be adaptable. It is harder to respond to change when the technology that you're using is more mainframe based. Likewise, if a solution that you are that's being utilized is no longer being supported, and the general management decision toward those solutions is Let's reserve support effort for absolute emergencies, and let's take enhancements to some other entity. It's going to be very hard to apply agility to those solutions. So what do we do? How do we break through? Somewhere in your organization, somebody's talking about DevOps. Personal opinion of John Cruson, DevOps is an alternative to SAFe. SAFe would tell you that it is a component that you can include in a SAFe implementation. To me, what I see as a difference between DevOps and SAFe is that DevOps allows for technological solutions to dealing with dependencies and dealing with risks that SAFe deals with in a very different way. SAFe would like to manage your dependencies and make those dependencies visible and allow managers to make decisions about what to do about those dependencies. DevOps would prefer to eliminate those dependencies and replace them with technical solutions. So if there is a DevOps entity in your organization and your responsibility is along the lines of advancing Agile, if those two efforts are not moving forward in alignment, you're missing out on a great opportunity to provide some technological power to the scaling of Agile at your company. Invisible barrier, apathy. There are people in your company that believe that this does not pertain to them, that think that this is something that you're doing that they're just either going to benefit from or it's good for you, but whatever, my life is going to go on. And if you'll hearken back to the idea of those three perspectives, if you're a delivery leader, if you're a technology leader, it is possible that there's somebody in the world of project management that thinks, okay, well, yeah, you go ahead and do your XP thing. We're going to continue running projects. If there is a product manager or a chief product owner who says that we're moving forward with agility, it is quite possible that members of the development teams think that there's really no change involved for them. There are people in your organization who are close to retirement, and it's going to be tough to get them to get excited about completely changing the ways that they operate. And then there are others who have been around for a while. They've been through it before, and they have the patience to wait for you to lose your energy, and then we'll just go back to the way things are. There's a guy, Craig Larman, who wrote Larman's Laws. We'll cover these in a little bit. But he does a good job of explaining what happens in organizations when change initiatives are presented. My recommendation here, breaking through these more people-oriented, apathy-oriented, invisible barriers, is to get really good at change and to practice change. We're here at Sketch. We're fond of a couple of different change models. The Heath brothers have a model in their book called Switch that makes sure that you focus on the three elements of change. There are emotional aspects of change, logical aspects of change, and environmental aspects of change. Just because there is a logical argument for scaling Agile in your organization doesn't mean that the people that are impacted by it are emotionally ready. And there are environmental triggers that keep the path of least resistance to be the way things always have been. So if the environment isn't changing to make it easier to operate in this new way, things aren't going to change. There's a change management model known as ADKAR that involves awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement on a more linear basis that can also be used to sort of model out your change effort and to build communication around it. Your message might be getting messy. There are some things that can get in the way of your message, things like the phase one problem. If you've phased out your Agile implementation or your scaling approach, you're going to hit phase one, and the rest of your organization is going to think that you're done. But you know that this is more of a direction than a destination, and that there are an infinite number of phases that follow it. But you're going to deal with the idea that people are going to experience some level of exhaustion after they went through all the effort to get to the end of phase one. So if we're not constantly painting that picture and reminding and reinforcing the idea that this is a journey that we're on, people are going to say, okay, good, I'm going to sit down for a minute and I'm just going to do it this way. The curse of knowledge is also an issue that we all deal with. that prevents us from creating clear messaging around what it is that we're trying to do. The curse of knowledge is this idea that from the position that we're in, some of the things that we're trying to do and some of the knowledge that we have is obvious to everyone else. It's obvious that agility is about cross-functional teams of self-organized individuals delivering value continuously and frequently, learning from that delivery. And adjusting accordingly, indefinitely. That is obvious to me because this is the work that I do every day. This is not the work that others do every day. So it's hard for me to even say that because I think, gosh, am I offending anyone with the obviousness of that message? So sometimes we have a tendency to just back off and start from the position of, okay, well, here's what you don't know. But there's a big gap between what we know and what we think others know and what others actually know. We really have to be a broken record over the things that we know other people know in order to keep a scaling on track. The quarterly reorg that has nothing to do with any attempt to scale Agile is going to get in the way of your message. So the message that we're trying to create is we're organizing into teams, and those teams are going to have control over what gets delivered based on direct feedback from the market. But here comes an email from another area of the organization that says, hey, we've reorganized ourselves and now this person's in charge of this and that person's in charge of that. And we leave everybody by thinking, okay, well, so which reorg is the reorg that I should be paying attention to? So this is a tough one. This comes right out of the Agile Manifesto. One of the principles of agility is the idea that simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. And you harken back to the idea that our value horizon is 3 to 5 years. This is one of those reasons why. It doesn't necessarily make sense to push harder on your desire to scale when there are conflicting messages abounding. One of those things might have to take a back seat temporarily. We might have to get better at saying now is not the time. And play the long game and decide when to make our moves. The last thing we want to do is get into 18 different change initiatives at the same time. More barriers that we can talk about. There are cultural protections going on in our organization all the time. Think about that. My Agile is better than your Agile. Everyone's protecting their definition of Agile because it creates a scenario that works better for them. Individuals protect their current roles, and in any scaled attempt, roles are going to change. What else is going to change is who has what power, the ability to make decisions, the ability to influence. Those are real things that people tend to protect. And people tend to like the way things are. We're just generally resistant to change, so there's a lot of status quo protections that you won't necessarily see on anyone's sleeve, but they're happening all the time. We just have to recognize that they happen. I mentioned Larman's laws earlier. It's very wordy. I'm not going to go through these words. I've made a simpler version of it. I hope Craig is okay with the reword, but basically Larman's laws state that people don't like change and they try to prevent it. Law number 2 suggests that one way to prevent change is to make the new words mean the same thing as the old words. So you could be called a Scrum Master, but you're going to do the things that a project manager does. Another way to prevent change is to deflect that change by calling out the imperfections of the new model. It's too purist. It needs some pragmatism. We hear concepts like I understand agility, but we need to adapt Agile to suit our organization. Now think about that, because what we're really after is an ability to be more agile. We need to adapt our organization so that we can be more agile. That's in conflict with what happens in law number 3. What law number 4 is about is those most threatened by the change may pretend to be teachers of the new way, but continue teaching the old way. So individuals will raise their hands so that they can be trainers or they can be coaches for this change initiative so that they have the opportunity to protect the old definitions. And then number 5, which is really law number 2, and the laws 2, 3, and 4 are corollaries of number 1. But this 5th one, culture follows structure and not the other way around. Larman would say that the statement is the opposite for really small organizations. But if you want to change the culture, there's an initiative of culture change is going to fail. The initiative of structure change should be followed instead, and changes in the culture result in changes to. Changes in the structure result in changes to the culture. So, given all of that, given what Craig Larman is suggesting, my suggestion is that we mind those three perspectives, because there are product managers, there are project managers, and there are development and delivery managers protecting the status quo, protecting definitions for good reason. They're on the hook for delivery in some capacity, but their view of the world is different than the view of the other two entities. And if this is going to work, if you're truly going to scale agility in your organization, all three of those entities need to be on board and need to share a definition. And that requires a lot of communication and a lot of expectation management. Maybe you're scaling a hollow framework. Maybe what you're trying to do is imitate rather than emulate. Maybe it's just the way that you're going about it that is the barrier. If you do, you have to keep in mind, as you're scaling a framework, you're also going to scale your problems. Your dependencies are just going to get bigger. Your technical debt will get bigger, and your work in process is going to get bigger. When, if you'll recall, dependencies are to be eliminated, technical debt is to be reduced, and work in process is to be reduced as well. If you're on this path, you're probably scaling your framework as opposed to scaling an outcome, and you're only making additive changes to the overall framework as opposed to eliminating things. The founder of Shopify is known for talking about how hard it is to remove things from a system. Adding things is really easy, but the tough work, the valuable work, is in the reduction and the removal of things that don't make sense in your system anymore. Here's what I would recommend if you're focused on the framework rather than focused on the outcomes. Do some work to connect your practices back to your principles. It's great that you have a framework. Here's the way that we look at Scrum, for example. You start with an infinite product backlog, and on some cadence, you focus and narrow that thing down to a 1 or a 2 week backlog. You do the work, you get feedback on the work, you inspect, and then you adjust your behavior. Well, you don't just do that because of the management principles that are at play in your organization today. Maybe there are new principles that we're trying to implement as well, and we're using new practices to protect those principles. We have an infinite looking backlog that we reduce on a frequent basis to an iteration backlog because we welcome changing requirements, even late in development. We create that cross-functional team that has the cross-functional abilities to get from concept to cash because we believe the best architectures and requirements and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. We have this practice of building a completed, working, shippable product on a frequent basis because we believe that working software is the primary measure of progress. When we recognize that these practices are meant to uphold a principle that we believe to be true in our organization, we have a much higher likelihood of actually seeing those principles lived out in reality. So some final words about breaking through those barriers. First of all, before we get into scaling, we have to make something that is worth scaling. There's got to be a team or an example or a prototype of the thing that you want to scale. And that thing has got to be the team that is small, that thing that is dedicated to some value delivery engine. That team's also got to be diverse. There are many different skills within that team that help you get from concept to cash. The development of that product has to be visible to other members of the organization. It's got to be product-oriented as opposed to task-oriented or function-oriented. And that product needs to be funded as opposed to funding that comes from some project that has a start and an end date. It's got to be authorized to be able to make decisions on a day-to-day basis about the future of that product. Those team members have to come into that team every day feeling like they are free from hierarchy, that there's nobody else on that team that they report to or that they have to get approval from. And they have to have direct line of sight to value delivery. The people on the other end, the receiving end of the things that team is building, have to make its way back directly to that team so that they have that meaning and that impact to the work that they're doing every day. Now, easier said than done. There's a lot in here, and there are a lot of, obviously, we just talked about barriers to even creating that, but it's so much easier to create that team as one team than to say, okay, this entire organization is going to look like that. We really have to double down on that idea of the cross-functional team, though, no matter what. Of all of these things that we've talked about, well, I'm now moving forward. All right, you're witnessing my PowerPoint limitations here. Of all of the things that we have talked about, it's the cross-functional team and the autonomy that we want to make sure that we are able to protect. We have to keep that team small and what we are scaling small. If we're thinking about scaling as, hey, here's a 5-person team that's operating really well and delivering, let's make them a 50-person team because they work so well, we just lost. Because the thing that works is the smallness. I am going to say, beware of SAFe, not because it's wrong, not because there's something inherently bad about SAFe. But what may be problematic is that you've looked at SAFe and said, this is the solution to all of our problems. And I mean, objectively, we have to understand that it can't possibly be the solution to all of our problems. It's a placemat of an organizational structure. And I don't know how many of us believe that every organization should look like SAFe's placemat. Let's not outsource our decision-making about our operating model to the Scaled Agile framework. It is your operating model. It's yours to own. It's yours to look at SAFe and say, well, here's a good idea. Let's try this. Well, there's a good idea. Let's try that. But here are some other things that create dependencies on dependencies that we would rather eliminate. And finally, just to close, we underestimate the value of managing the message. There was a book written in 1889. I'm aging myself by talking about this book. But Thomas Smith wrote a book called Successful Advertising. And in it, he reflects on how frequently we have to message our audience in order to get through to them. And his message sounds like this. The first time people look at an ad, they don't see it. The second time, they don't notice it. The third time, they're aware that it's there. The fourth time, they have a fleeting sense that they've seen it before. The fifth time, they actually read the ad. The sixth time, they thumb their nose at it. The seventh time, they get a little irritated with it. The eighth time, they think, here's that confounded ad again. The ninth time, they wonder if they're missing out on something. The 10th, they ask their friends or neighbors if they've tried it. The 11th, they wonder how the company's paying for all these ads. The 12th time, they start to think that it must be a good product. The 13th time, they start to feel the product has value. The 14th time, they start to feel that they've wanted a product like this for a long time. The 15th time, they start to yearn for it because they can't afford to buy it. The 16th time, they accept the fact that they will buy it sometime in the future. The 17th time, they make a commitment to buy the product. The 18th time, they curse their poverty because they can't buy this terrific product. The 19th time, they count their money very carefully. And the 20th time, prospects see the ad, they buy what is offering. 20 times. I mean, so this explains why we see those ridiculous Spectrum commercials. Sorry if anybody from Spectrum is on the webinar. You know what I mean, though. But there's a science to what's going on here, and we are no different inside our organizations. We're changing minds here. You're going to get ignored the first 8 to 10 or 11 times you send the message. Your job is sort of to be a broken record, and eventually, just as you start to feel like they might be exhausted, that's when they're going to start listening. So, if nothing else, I remember decades ago I was working for a magazine, and somebody had a version of this posted. Man, I spent hours looking on the internet for this thing. I'm so glad I found it because it's a perfect illustration of the effort that it takes to actually institute change inside an organization or out. So don't give up. Little pep talk. So before I lose everybody, shameless plug, please sign up for our newsletter where we talk more about these things in your inbox. And we're going to head over to questions. So.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Matt House, by the way, DJ for the day on Q&A.
All right. I'm going to open up with a twofer.
A twofer.
A twofer.
Okay.
So Peter L. Hi, Peter L. wants to know, what is your definition of cross-functional teams? And then Anonymous wants to know, what are your thoughts on having a platform team? Figured those dovetailed nicely together.
Yeah, this is so much better as a conversation. I would love to know what Anonymous thinks a platform team is, because it's one of those things like, what do you think Agile is? But what is a cross-functional team? We always go back to the idea of concept to cash. So a cross-functional team is made up of the people that have the requisite collective skills to ideate, so to come up with an idea, to prioritize that idea, to refine that idea so that it's understandable enough to build that idea, to deliver that idea in exchange for some cash or revenue or the exchange of value. Cross-functional is a spectrum. If you have a team that's all developers and you have a team that is all analysts behind it and a team that is all QA ahead of it, very clearly not a cross-functional team. But if you have a team that includes analysts, developers, and QA, that's closer to a cross-functional team. But even better, if your team includes somebody who owns the product that you're building as a member of the team, who can not just ideate with the rest of the team, but also authorize the prioritization of that idea as the next thing to be delivered. You're way ahead of the game on cross-functional. Plus, if you have the delivery capability, or your team, your DevOps team, is also a deliverer, now you have the ability to get that idea into production, hopefully through automation. So in our previous webinar, we talked a lot about the value stream. All of the steps along the way of what it takes to get from, I have this idea, I need to build this idea, I need to get this idea in production. Instead of having multiple teams have to weigh in when it's their turn, if that idea of delivering this idea is one team, you're cross-functional. The platform team, so a platform team takes a lot of different instantiations. So it's hard for me to opine on this because I might be thinking about it differently than you are. But we've seen it work and we've seen it not work. When we see it not work, it's because that platform team has become the dependency. We've seen at companies like Spotify that platform teams are more successful when they have the luxury of being able to open source their platform. So there are people that are working on it, but as a means to not be the dependency, they do two things. One, they open source so that any of the teams relying on that platform have the ability to adjust the code, and they have a process for code reviews between the teams. Or that platform team sort of reinvents itself as a service delivery team, as opposed to owning a product of itself. Their customers are the other developers, and developers want APIs. They want services. They don't want tickets. So as long as we're constructing that platform team in a way that eliminates handoffs, eliminates a dependency and a wait and a stair-step approach to delivering, there's little wrong with that.
All right.
You have any thoughts on that?
No, pretty similar. I mean, you want to make sure that platform team is able to be an enabler for other people and not just another bottleneck that everything's got to pass through in order to get anything done.
Yeah, it goes back to enabling over controlling.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, our next question is another anonymous one, and it's, how do you get the business to embrace the concept and not assume it's just an IT thing?
Yeah. So I go back to Switch, the Switch model, the emotional, the environmental, and the logical aspects. First of all, if you can build a relationship, if you have a relationship that is more transformational and less transactional with the business, you're more likely to be heard. If you can create some empathy with the business and you can start conversations with what's in it for them, then you're more likely to find some middle ground implementation approach that's going to work. But just logically explaining the benefits of agility is not going to cut it. Just relying on the emotional reaction that they have to the way you're delivering today versus the way you want to deliver isn't going to help. And it doesn't matter if you deal with the emotional and the logical aspects. If the path of least resistance is to continue operating the way that you operate today, very little will likely change. The way that you operate has to be the path of least resistance. environmentally.
All right. Our next question. Where do you start when some teams in your organization are agile and some aren't?
You start with the good ones and make sure that you're at a point where you have something that is worth scaling. Kind of like we talked about, we've gotten the cross-functional capability. We've proven that it works. Being in an organization where some teams are agile and some teams are not is actually a good place to be because you've got your proving ground. You've proven that it can work. Where we start is, let's not make the mistake of thinking that these groups over here that are not agile just need to start looking like this other one. There are so many things in the group that is agile that have nothing to do with the way they were organized that creates that level of agility. The contextual specifics of their tech stack, the number of people on the team, the way that area was funded. There are so many impacts that make it easier or harder. All of those things have to be considered when looking at the rest of the organization and saying, how are we going to create agility over here? Let's figure out where those barriers might be, and let's create plans for avoiding those barriers. Start there.
All right. Our next one, this is a good one. How can you implement decisions at the lowest level?
Well, we start by putting the people who have the authority to make those decisions on the team. So we're not saying you don't make that decision anymore. These people make the decision. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking more about you make these decisions, you should probably be on that team. You should probably consider yourself more of this team's membership than membership with the other decision makers of other things. Really what we're trying to do is we're drawing the battle line. We've got the organization behind it, and we've got our customers in front of it. And we want those people, the deliverers and the decision makers, hand in hand, as close to those customers as we possibly can. There's the defense for making decisions at the lowest level is that they're the ones with the most recent, real-time information. So they're in the best position to make those decisions.
All right. Next question. A lot of times Agile at scale can just be delivery at scale. What happens to culture at scale?
Culture follows structure. If you have a culture of delivery, then I don't know that there's that much wrong with that. As long as that delivery is of high quality and that delivery is founded on the idea that we're delivering to create feedback so that we can get better at what we deliver next. If you're talking about delivery at scale because we demand it and you're manufacturing features, okay, then we have a problem. Because I'm talking mostly about a technology environment or software environment where most of the work that we do, like it or not, is wrong and needs to be corrected in some way. So if we're taking delivery at scale and pairing it with the mindset that every day is game day, we only get one draft to get the stuff right, we've created conflict. But delivery at scale with the mindset of this round, you're going to deliver something and give me feedback so that I can inform the next round. It goes back to that definition that we talked about, where teams deliver continuously and frequently. They learn from that delivery and adjust accordingly. Then delivery at scale is great. Let's just start there and adjust the mindset.
All right. See this? Here's a good one. What do I do as a coach in an organization currently implementing SAFe?
Well, so again, I have to say, SAFe is not the enemy here. SAFe, there are a lot of good ideas bucketed into SAFe. I would say there's a weird thing going on in the Agile world right now where a lot of people are looking at Agile SAFe first because their first experience, their front door to agility was SAFe. And SAFe is way, way more than Agile that we talk about. Agile is really the embodiment of values and principles. SAFe is a way to try to embody those values and principles in a large organization, but then they did something weird where they wrote their own values or their own principles. So is it even Agile? If you are an Agile coach, I think it's incumbent upon you to really understand the values and principles of agility and do your own homework and make your own decisions about which of those values match up to A, safe, and B, the things that are appropriate and responsible for you to protect in your organization given its age and size and technology stack and existing mindset and existing momentum.
All right. Andy would like to know how to make scaled Agile less like process scale versus more of a mindset scale.
Yeah, it goes back to the message. I would craft that question in the form of a statement, and I would repeat it to everyone who would listen at least 20 times. You got to get on the broken record train. They will hear you, and then they will forget, and then they'll hear you, and they'll forget. We know it. Again, curse of knowledge. We get that there's a difference between scaling a process and scaling a mindset. But other people have work to do. Other people have obligations to uphold, expectations to meet. They're thinking about that stuff all day. So if we think that we can just sit down with them once, explain logically that it's about mindset and it's not about process, and that our job is done, then we're looking at it short-sightedly.
All right. How might an enterprise organization make OKRs visible and how every cross-functional team member can see how they can provide value and impact?
OKRs. So I guess we're starting with the idea that the OKRs are the solution, but what are they the solution to? If they're a solution to alignment, then great. But there's probably momentum that you're dealing with there as well. If you're in a large organization, you're likely dealing with some existing performance management plan. And that existing performance management plan probably involves goals that are tied to your performance, to your compensation, right? So there's another momentum issue there that has to be addressed. So my suggestion would be to figure out where we can get buy-in at the highest level to be more open about and transparent about where these OKRs are coming from. Use that person as part of this coalition that we talked about across the three perspectives, and really focus on making sure that those OKRs are meaningful across project management, product management, and development and delivery management.
All right. There is a large effort involving multiple teams and organizations, particularly one that has a deadline. How can we stay agile and not become project-oriented?
So this is a fun one. It's that question is sort of formed. It's crafted in the form of an opinion. In that, if there's a deadline, that you're a project-oriented organization, and I firmly believe that is not the case. I believe that an Agile organization loves deadlines. In fact, an Agile organization loves deadlines so much that they create one every day or every week or every 2 weeks. If deadlines are getting in the way, to me that is a signal that we're not using our practices to promote those principles and to protect those principles in the ways that we could. You can still hit a deadline even if you're looking for feedback along the way. There are tools, there are metrics, there are practices that can be applied at a team level or at a multiple team of teams level that allows deadlines and agile delivery processes and approaches to live in harmony.
All right. We've got a couple questions around team formations and around defining product teams versus task function teams, or product teams versus platform teams or service delivery teams.
Okay.
What would you say, maybe just more generally, around how should we be forming our teams in our organizations?
I think there is one answer per company for that question. Again, it kind of goes back to SAFE and this notion that SAFE knows how you should organize. In some instances, we've been successful helping companies craft teams using a draft system, using an opt-in system. So the team missions have been identified, and all of the people that could be on one of those teams are in a pool, and they self-select into those teams. That's one model. We've been successful in harnessing that triumvirate of product management, project management, and delivery management to decide what these teams should look like. But we're most successful when we use a blend of both, when we involve the needs of the people that have to manage this organization into the future and the people that are delivering based on those management decisions.
All right, I got time for one more, and this is a good one because everybody's been through this. We talked about going through this change cycle more times, going over and over again.
Yep.
How do you avoid burnout for organizational change?
Yeah. So organizational change is not something that's going to go away. That definition of Agile is not something that we will stand behind in 5, 10, 15 years. You're going to get to a point where you say, okay, we feel like we're pretty good at living this thing that we were trying to get to, and then realize there's a better way to do it. What I'm getting at is organizational change is never going away. Your job is to roll with change. I mean, I was just thinking about this in the car. I think back, my mind does weird things in the car, and I was thinking about what somebody who was in the 1930s in their 20s, what they must have thought about how their life had changed from the 1930s to the 1940s to the 1950s, when they were in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Their world changed from depression to World War to prosperity over a 30-year period. And then you fast forward from the 90s to the O's to the teens to the 20s. Our world has changed dramatically over those decades, if probably even at a higher rate of change. The rate of change that individuals and organizations are experiencing is only going to increase. And we had a slide in there called practicing change. It's just something you're going to have to get good at. It's something that mentally you're going to have to come to grips with. This is never going to end. It's just part and parcel of being part of an organization. That's probably really depressing and not very uplifting, but those who are good at writing it and looking around and saying, oh, it's different, let's roll with it, those are the ones that are going to thrive and survive over the next few decades in organizations. Are we good?
I think so.
Well, hey, if you stuck with us all the way through, I really appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to join us. This will be available to all of you once we get it all edited and loaded up on sketchdev.io. And hopefully we will see you next quarter for our, what will that be, our spring webinar or winter webinar? Summer webinar? One of those. And have a good day, everybody.